got all her stuff over here. Shane's got his bag and everything over here.
Let's stay focused.
Do you want
That's not,
some
that's
cheese
not
with
anything.
your wine?
Okay.
I'll move over. Is this better for you?
We ready? She's ready now.
Okay. The first one tonight is, number 4. I mean, number 5, you know what, smarty pants.
Well, here, I just made it big so you can read it. There you go. Oh, you want number?
Number 5 is a public hearing, consideration of 2018-2019 budget amendment, number 1. Thank you, sir.
Bet.
Okay, so in the packet was the state form that'll be filed for the budget amendment. This is our first amendment for the fiscal year 19. It will be our only one. This is the last time we can, well, you could amend it earlier, but this is getting down to the deadline for this fiscal year that ends June 30th. The second page that was in the packet with the the state document was showing you the increases of revenues and expenditures. So basically, we're increasing the revenues due to bond proceeds that we're getting in, and also some transfers that we're making that were not budgeted. And then on the expenditure side, Jim and myself have gone through the detail and estimated out the next 2 months where we think we might need some tweaking. And again, you'll see those numbers. Our budget, again, is done by these different, can't even talk right, can't even think of the name, the different functions. So public safety, public works, community and economic development, general government. And then out to the side, you can see the different things that we have seen a little bump up than what was originally budgeted. So again, public safety for fire, we've spent some more money for turnout gear uniforms, the 3rd ambulance location and training. Police, we've, some of these same things we talked about in the fiscal year 20 budget. Building expenses are a little bit higher. We've got some overtime. We had to replace a generator and a siren at the Dane Tower. Public Works, we're increasing that by $132,000. Snow removal and overtime, that was higher than what we budgeted as expected for our winter. Economic development, we did a few expenditures we didn't have budgeted, the sports marketing study, and then the Grow Greater Burlington campaign expenditure. Here at City Hall, under general government, we're remodeling some more bathrooms. Our insurance was a little bit higher. We're also purchasing some more IT licenses. Debt service increasing, that's due to the bond fees. When we set our budget the prior year, we don't include those bond fees until we actually do the bonding. Culture and rec, we just had a few things that were a little bit higher in library, forestry, and the port. And then on the business type, what you just approved, the sewer refinancing, those almost always are not budgeted, so we need to get that expenditure in because we will receive that money and then we'll turn around and it will go out to pay off the old bond. So we do, that's why it's $6.6 million for that. The CART program, we're increasing that almost $500,000. And then under parking, we had a little bit more property maintenance charges. Does anybody have any questions? Okay.
We're good?
Good.
Thank you, Steph.
Even with the budget amendment, general fund, net cash for the year should be, I mean, right now, we're still 2 months out for seeing where we close with different revenues, expenditures, but we're still on track to, we budgeted to have about a $45,000 increase in net cash in the general fund, and that's pretty much where we're still at for the year right now,
Okay.
even with these different changes.
Council, we good?
Good.
All right. Next, we have number 6, motion for preliminary adoption of a second reading of an ordinance amending various sections of Chapter 34, Human Rights Commission of the Burlington Municipal Code. Steph.
Okay, this is second reading. This is where we're just making the changes to change the quorum amount for that group and also reflecting exactly what we do, which is promote and educate about the Iowa Civil Rights Law. We're just taking out the language that says we do investigations because we don't. Everything gets referred to the Iowa Civil Rights Commission.
Right on.
And then if you would like to waive the second and do a final
Yes.
adoption, that'd be great.
Okay. I suggest
I
we do
would say-
that.
I would say so.
Okay. Takes us to number, we're good?
Yes.
Takes us to number 7, resolution authorizing and approving a loan agreement and providing for issuance and securing the payment of a sewer revenue refunding bond, Series 2019B, in the principal amount of $5,840,000. James?
And I don't think this is in your packet. We're still waiting on that from the attorney. But this is the same issue that we just finished up on the special session. This would be the issuance of the new bonds that would replace the ones that we just authorized the call on. The refinancing schedule is the same time frame, remains callable during the life of the loan, and should have a savings of in that 500,000 range.
Good deal. Guys, we're good there, right?
Yep.
Yes.
Very
Okay.
good.
Number 8 is resolution awarding contract for the 2019 locust sewer separation project. Mr. McGregor.
Good evening. This project has been one that we've discussed quite a bit. It's a sewer separation for the Locust Basin. We were out to bid for approximately a month. It has CDGB funds, and then we will use SRF to pay for it. The engineer's estimate was just over $5.6 million. Unfortunately, the bids came back a little higher than that, and the lowest bid was almost $6.2 million. So the reasons for the difference between the estimate and the bid, the biggest reason I can ascertain is it's a pretty densely populated area that they're going to be doing work in. And also Davis-Bacon applies to this, so because of the federal money, you have to use prevailing wages, buy American steel, so it inflates the cost of doing construction work. And we are more greatly affected, I think, than the Cedar Rapids, Davenport area, where they have a little bit larger contractors that have those types of rates anyway. So I don't know if that is the whole reason why. I would still recommend awarding bid due to the consent order that we are currently under to separate our sewers by 2025. We are trying to renegotiate that, but if we do not award bid and we wait further, I feel like it doesn't show a very good faith effort that we're trying to get this part of it done. So I would recommend awarding bid to Phi Excavating.
What this will end up, this is being financed with a state revolving fund loan. This will essentially, with the cost overrun being higher than what the estimate was, will just mean a higher loan amount, and as we repay, the repayment schedule will be on a higher dollar amount. As you're going through this, I didn't hear anything from the engineers or from your department that suggested that waiting 6 months is going to significantly impact what you'd have for bid amounts coming back. This is just the nature of what this project is.
Why did we only get 2 bidders?
In all honesty, I don't know. We had a pre-bid meeting 2.5 weeks prior to the bid opening, and it was the same 2 bidders. We sent it out to, several larger firms that do sewer type work, and I think they checked out the plans because we can see on the website who checked out plans, but I'm not sure. You know what I mean? I don't know if there's just enough work going out right now for contractors that their schedules are full. But
So-
yeah, a $5.5 million+ project should get the attention of some contractors.
But $600,000 is a pretty big variance between where we thought it was gonna be and where it came in at.
And to only have 2 bidders, are we sure it's not gonna make sense to try and rebuild this even in just a few months?
That's kind of what I'm thinking too. If we were to wait 6 months, we're still showing good faith effort that we're proceeding on it. It's just delayed a little bit to see if we can get better pricing. That is a huge chunk.
My only
difference.
fears is that we've chased CDGB funds for over a year, and so 6 months, yes, but it would be actually longer from when the planned project was supposed to happen. It would be a year and a half, and the duration of this project is about a year in proximity. So, you're looking at 2.5 years from the initiation of when we should have started the project to the end of it.
I get that, but I'm
What
looking at a lot of money, taxpayers' money too, I'm accountable for.
What if we don't do 6 months? What if it's only a couple of months?
In all honesty, getting in deeper into the summer, I don't know that you get yourselves any better bids.
I'm good with it.
I would be hesitant to sit and wait. I don't know that you're gonna get yourself any better price. Unfortunately, this is This is the variance that happens when engineers sit down on a piece of paper and computer and they draw stuff up versus what contractors see is what the amount of work. You know, they're looking at the sequence of events that have to happen to try and get that construction project done. So,
And probably the density of the population too doesn't factor very well into it because there's so many people living there that becomes a hassle as well.
Yeah, but I would have liked to think that that was already included in the engineer's estimate.
Might have been,
Yeah,
but
the-
you
the
don't know
one-
how the business looks at it.
the one thing that I would think of is the closeness of the buildings in the alleyways. You know, we talked about some of the alleyway work and the easements that are required for this project. You know, there's some risk there. You know, you're excavating a 20-foot hole next to two buildings that are 5 foot away. There's some risk involved in trying to do that type of excavation. So I don't know what goes into a contractor's mind when they're bidding a project, but, you know, risk definitely has a factor.
We good?
I'm good.
Yep.
Yes.
Number 9 is resolution approving the 28E agreement concerning public safety emergency communications in Des Moines County, Iowa. Hello.
I am Shanna Krogmeyer, for those of you, I've met most of you, but the director of DESCOM. So our 2080 agreement, as you've probably heard, is up for renewal in June. We had a countywide work session, I guess you'd call it, brought in all the, I guess, interested parties and kind of sat down and worked out what they'd like to see as far as changes or additions, subtractions from the original 2080, which was established in 2014. So the control board met and approved the current draft of the 2080. Essentially, it changed the funding structure slightly, added Middletown as a party to that funding. Also added a seat for Burlington on the voting directors to better reflect the population density. And added a seat for the rural incorporated cities, so Mediapolis, Danville, Middletown are going to share a seat. That was kind of the resounding thing that all three of them came back with, was they wanted some representation on that control board. Other than that, it added a seat to an advisory board that's a EMS position. And in reality, it didn't change the funding structure very much for Burlington at all, so I don't know if you have any questions for me or.
Council?
Okay, thanks.
Thank you, Shannon.
There was quite a bit of discussion about whether to move to a levy, a countywide levy that was done at the county level, do away with the funding from the localities. That was something that we had pushed on. It was something that had come up as there was support from West Burlington to see something like that happen. The county was not in favor of that at all.
They wouldn't discuss it at all.
They didn't even want to talk, huh?
Yeah, and, you know, I know, John, you've asked me whether it was worth, how much of a protest there is that you should give on this.
Yep, well, I mean, we need DESCOM for sure. I think we need that as an organization for our county, but I don't think we're done yet on this issue. I know West Burlington's gonna push, and I think we're gonna continue to push to get what I feel is a better situation, a better solution, and that would be an emergency services countywide levy. I think that's the fairest way to do it. The Hawkeye found where we were getting double tapped on some money over a course of time, and that's really I believe the fairest and easiest way to do it. So
My only question is what steps can we take in order to force their hand? Are there any?
You could refuse to sign an agreement, but you may call into question if the county doesn't want to have a countywide levy, and they've been fairly adamant on that, you could have an entity fall apart and not continue, because our current agreement expires the end of June.
So, just to be clear, if this agreement doesn't get passed by June 30th, we'll file an extension, and DESCOM's not going anywhere until we get this funding thing figured out. There are some options that would basically be going at it from a emergency management side of it. It's not necessarily the county whose decision it is. It is, and obviously we want everybody to be on the same page with us. But the Emergency Management Commission would be the one that would have to vote to approve that. So that's a pretty well-represented board by everybody in the county. So that would be the next course of action.
Okay.
Any other questions
Is
for
it
Shannon?
one that you would recommend having occur?
I am pretty neutral on the subject, as long as DESCOM is funded. You know, we continue to do the work that we're gonna do, one way or the other. This is just kind of more nuts and bolts of where we're gonna pay for it. And I know that's not necessarily the answer you want. I might have an opinion one way or the other, but in reality, as long as, well, we have the funding to keep doing what we're doing, that's really all I'm concerned about.
So what if, so let's, how long can we operate with just, without a contract? So if we go into a stalemate on this discussion.
Sure.
Cause DESCOM's not gonna go anywhere.
Yeah, I would recommend, and there's provisions within this 2080 to approve the contract under under the current language, and then upon a vote of the control board, a majority vote, we can open it back up for discussion. So, I mean, you know, if we wanna get in under that June 30th deadline, that would probably be the route that I would recommend. Or we can file an extension with the state and go that route too.
I'm very apprehensive to vote to approve something where I feel like the citizens of Burlington aren't getting the same shake as county citizens. So, I don't know.
Okay. How so? Just curious,
Well,
I mean,
just in how it's been broken down, it sounds
Okay.
like, we're paying, if you live in the city of Burlington, you're paying the county tax and you're paying the city portion of that, correct?
well, that's apparently what the county's been doing, yes.
Okay, so if we were to go to a county-wide assessment, the city, people that live in the city of Burlington and also live in the county would pay the same that people that live outside the city would pay, correct?
Correct?
So, regardless of whether the city of Burlington exists, Des Moines County still has to have emergency services response or 911, E911 services. So I don't understand why this is even an issue.
You know, the citizens, it's gonna, I don't have the numbers in front of me, and it's gonna change slightly, but in reality, the citizens aren't gonna see that much of a change one way or the other. Where it's gonna change is, it's not coming directly out of your general fund to pay it. It's gonna, I mean, they're gonna be taxed one way or the other to provide emergency services. It's just not gonna come out of the city's general fund
If
to
we were
do
to go
so.
to, if we were to go to a countywide assessment, what would that do to the city's, per thousand rate?
About 70 cents.
Okay, and how much would a Burlington citizen see in their increase from the county?
That would be a question for Cheryl down at the county. It was right around there, though, when we had these conversations. I mean, you're not getting rid of the tax, you're just changing where it's coming from.
Changing the funding system, but
Maybe.
if, I wanna say, didn't we read something recently where it was actually less than 70 cents? It was about a third of that.
I don't think it's a third, I think it is less.
Is-
Okay, that's fine.
Yeah.
Any other questions for Shannon?
Okay, thank you.
Council can move forward how you want to on this. I guess a couple of things to note. How many dispatch centers are there across the state?
113,
How many different funding mechanisms are there?
about 110.
So,
They are, I mean, it's broken down. Half of them do some variation of what we're doing. Half of them do some variation of an emergency management levy. And then there's a few that are in the middle, but it really is.
so you're not gonna find that there's one way that it should be. There are a lot of different perspectives on what it should be. So as we approach it and you talk about it and say that it makes more sense, you also have to recognize that there are a lot of folks who would say that it makes a lot of sense the way it is, because you're gonna find a lot of entities across the state to do it. So as you try to figure out what you're doing moving forward, you've got some partners that you work with on this that have a much different perspective, and you have to try to figure out how you're gonna work with them as you move forward into the future on this issue as well as others, and where does it make the most sense to try to, where you want to push things. That's really a perspective that I don't have a lot of guidance. That's more of a policy issue from you folks to have.
Any other questions, guys? Anything else for Shannon?
I'm good at the moment.
Thank you.
Okay. Let's move to the consent agenda. And we're gonna roll downhill on that. First is a resolution approving nuisance abatements for various properties. We're good there, right? Number 2 is a resolution to establish new rental fees and charge schedules for Memorial Auditorium, the Port of Burlington, and the Depot Riverfront properties effective July 1st, 2019. Gentlemen?
Good afternoon. We were here a month or so ago and proposed some new rates for the auditorium, the depot, and the port. And we had some questions about the nonprofit pricing and stuff like that. And I believe, I don't know if it was Jim and Stephanie that worked on this and came up with a new one. They sent it to David and I. We were comfortable with it. I don't know if you guys had a chance to look at it and had any questions on the new.
Council, do you guys have any questions?
Tried to incorporate the tiers that you or the rates that you had for the just general
Yep.
events, and we used to have, there were 3 tiers, the nonprofit organization, and then there's a central tier that I don't think anybody really outside of, if you read through it and then would try to apply an event, you could try to make it work, but it was pretty difficult
Just a lot of
to
confusing.
make it happen. With the idea of having trying to maintain a nonprofit organization rate, I essentially put in figures that, based off of what you were having for your new general event, kind of corresponded with the same difference that there was previously.
Yep.
So I was hoping it made sense for what
yeah,
I put to match what you were trying to accomplish.
Absolutely, yep.
And if you notice, it does mention in there that events, at the bottom of the spreadsheet that has the charges, it does note that events may be eligible for a fee negotiation, subject to the approval of Burlington River Entertainment, which is kind of what you're looking for, some flexibility for trying to
Yeah, every event's
encourage
just
use.
different. Everybody that comes in there and does something, there's either more or less, and it's, if they're asking for a whole lot more, that's gonna take a whole lot more labor and stuff like that. It's just nice to have that flexibility to be able to bump up to cover that cost.
Sounds good.
Okay?
I think you guys have been doing a pretty good job. I don't know who the silent kid is next to you, but he looks like a rock star.
First time he's ever been silent. Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Okay, number 3 is a resolution approving removal of 4 no parking from 8 a.m. to 10 a.m. Monday through Friday signs on the 700 and 800 block of Randall Lane. Mr. McGregor.
This resolution is based on a request from the property owners in the area to remove some current no parking signs. As stated there, Monday through Friday, 8 a.m. to 10 a.m. So Randall Lane is in fairly close approximation to the high school. I think they were installed back in the day to prohibit kids from parking there all day long. So that's the reason why you see that short duration. We've talked to the property owners in the area. They see no reason to leave them there. To me, there's really not that much function over a 2-hour period of time to prohibit parking. So I would recommend approval to remove them from the area.
You guys, any questions?
So on the map up there, where is that?
Oh, I've got some sign locations.
Where the red
It's
is?
on Randall
Okay.
Lane, yep.
Okay, thank you.
Randall Lane's a pretty short section.
So I'll have to admit that back in high school, I was one of those kids that used to park there.
You're the reason why the signs went up?
And
It's all your fault.
I wasn't the only one.
Yes,
I'm not joking. It was not uncommon to have 30 vehicles parked back there. Are we sure this is what we want to do? Because it wasn't until they put the signs up that parking no longer was an issue. And I'm not kidding.
Yeah.
There was a number of vehicles.
I mean, if you drive in the neighborhood of the high school, you don't see near the parking issues, I think, that you probably saw in the past. There's a lot of signage in that neighborhood, but they also had parking prohibitions in the parking lot too, correct? They have
Well, you used to have to
limits. They have
pay for a
limits.
parking pass, so we would circumvent that by just parking there in other streets, and eventually ended up buying a parking pass. But when I was a freshman, man, things were tight.
So if you approve this resolution, it'll have come full circle then for you.
I guess.
That's right, let's give the,
I'm only, the neighbors are aware that we're doing this, and they're okay
Correct.
with
They're
it.
the ones that requested.
Okay.
are we good, guys?
We're good.
I believe so.
All right. Number 4 is a resolution approving Iowa Contaminated Site Environmental Covenant for property located at 1106 Washington Street, former Dresser Rand site. Mr. Tisland?
This was previously approved by city council. With that approval, they've not referenced some definitions under Iowa Administrative Code, Chapter 137 and 135 about what residential is. So this is essentially this same format as before that was approved by council related to the Dresser Rand site. Environmental covenants related to the contamination on the site and restricting residential use, well installation, and then requiring a soil management plan if excavation were to happen on the property. But there was just some definition language that was not included in the original covenant that the DNR wanted included in it. So they have since signed off on it, their signatures on this covenant, and just want the city to sign off on the same one that they have.
Right on. Council, any issues with that?
None for me.
Okay. Number 5 is resolution naming the street located in the 16th addition to Flint Ridge Business Park subdivision. Mr. Tisland?
So this is, map here, the Lot A, related to the east-west drive, on the south side of the turf connecting to Broadway, between West Burlington Avenue and Broadway. This was previously platted by the Greater Burlington Partnership as the 16th edition of Flint Ridge Business Park. At that time, they did not name the street. Typically, streets are either named through, during the final plat process, but they did not have a
We
name.
did name that, actually. It was McCampbell Avenue for a while,
It was.
until you guys took that away from me, so.
It wasn't named on the actual plat, but, so
I don't
this.
remember asking for the extras, but anyways, please
So
continue.
this, by our city code, if it's not named on a plat, then it has to go through the planning commission and city council by resolution to name a street. This did go to the planning commission on April 23rd, and they voted to recommend the name brought forward by the partnership as Hinkle Drive.
Guys? Can't get any support on McCampbell Avenue, so
Nope.
we're good to go?
Yes.
Number 6, I don't appreciate that laugh. Number 6 is a resolution approving a yard waste program for collection and disposal of leaves. Don?
Pretty straightforward. I've made comments about this before and indicated our desire to eliminate the use of the 33-gallon cans. They've historically been allowed in the program. Since they have been allowed, which would have been in the late 90s, I think is when that started. We've since gone to the cart program this past spring. We did allow carts to be used. In discussing the matter with the crews and looking at things, we've been wanting to get rid of the cans for quite a while. The council that adopted that resolution originally wanted to recognize that there are small generator of leaves, and they were concerned about the cost of the bags going up. And they felt that a can being used the day after their garbage is emptied from the can was reasonable, and adopted a resolution to allow the use of those cans. We're wanting to get rid of the cans because it's more to handle, it takes more time. Some people are very, very concerned about their cans and how they're handled. Some have lids, some do not have lids. Those that don't have lids can collect moisture, and it stays in the can. We had a rough fall this past fall with the winter to cold weather. Some of the leaves freeze in the can. People who have lids want the lids back on the cans, put the cans back on the curb where you got them. And it's just as much more efficient cleaner program by us just having to pick up a bag and throw it in the truck and going forward, rather than messing with cans and messing with carts. And so this resolution is to put an end to the use of 33-gallon cans, and also we did tried it this spring, but we'd like to also do away with the use of the city carts.
Do we have a plan of attack for education?
Just our normal means. We have the newsletter that'll go out, that we send out annually. It typically is in homes by July 1st, the start of the fiscal year. It'll be in that, and then of course we do advertise in the newspaper. We do a news release when it comes time to have the program prior to the start of the program. And then we just handle it at the various locations as situations arise. We have people who still put out leaves in plastic bags after all these years, and we end up leaving those plastic bags, which we would do the same thing with leaves that are in the cans or in the trash carts.
It makes sense, and I get it. There's gonna be some people that aren't happy about that.
Yes, I'm sure
They want to
there will be.
use their old trash cans, or whatever, for leaves, but this makes a lot of sense to me. And,
Don,
I'm in
I had a
agreement.
question on the bags, the special leave bags. Those are designed to biodegrade, aren't they, in the
Yes.
landfill? Okay.
Yes,
I'm happy about that.
yes.
But and I like the idea of getting away from the old 33-gallon with the lids that blow all over. But I'm still wondering why you don't want them to use the
Well,
carts. I know
The experience with the carts, this past fall, the LEAF program was in place and functioning when we did delivery of the carts. And people did use, not a lot of people, but there were people who were using the carts, given the opportunity to do so. It was a rough fall. If you remember, there were a lot of leaves that ended up being left in the streets and in the yards because the weather changed
Yeah, we
back
got
and
that
forth so
freezing
badly.
snow on top of the
We
leaves,
had, we had a lot of issues with that. It slowed us down as far as in our collection of leaves. Our primary focus as a solid waste department is to pick up the garbage. We wanted to make sure we got the garbage. We were falling behind on our schedules on our leaves. So we had people's carts who had leaves in them 2 and 3 days after their scheduled leaf pickup. They had no place to put their garbage. They were calling and complaining about, hey, when are you gonna get my leaves emptied out of my cart? I'm supposed to have that emptied the day after my garbage. And so
you foresee that could happen again if you get bad weather?
Well, we can't control the weather, and by
'Cause I know you
eliminating
were
the
trying
use
to
of the
get
carts,
the
then we're not gonna
program
have
out
those
too at the
calls.
same time, so.
Pardon?
You're trying to get the program established at the same time.
Yes.
So you're delivering carts, and you had a lot going on this fall.
That's true, that's true. It's been a rough 12 months, I would say, yeah.
How much is it to buy a leaf bag? How much is a leaf bag?
I don't know, I don't buy leaf bags
Anybody
because
know?
I haul them to the ravines, but I know that was a concern early on in the program about that. I believe when we first implemented the program, they were around $1.75 for a package of 5. I think that you can still find them for $2 or less. I think that
And
many
that's
of the
for
stores put
five
them on
bags?
5 bags
okay.
per package, correct.
Okay, thank you, Don. Comment, questions?
you guys good?
Don, there was a couple of years where citizens just had to rake the leaves to the curb, and then they were picked up. How did we used to do that?
Prior to the LEAF program, well, I was asked by the city council to investigate different options, and we brought in special equipment, and we looked at the bag program and tried to put some costs together. Prior to that, people simply raked their leaves to the curb, somewhere in the street, somewhere on the boulevard, and the intent was for the street department to bring in their loaders and their dump trucks and load leaves off of the street. There was concern at the time expressed about children playing in leaves and possibly a car hitting a child playing in the leaves that were there along the curb. And so I think it was partly driven by safety at the time to move away from that type of program. It was also partly due to wanting to free up the street department personnel and equipment to do what their primary purpose is to work on maintaining the streets, dealing with the sewers, the catch basins, and so on and so forth. And they were given, I think the council was given 3 different options. One was be a back truck that would go along and vacuum up the leaves that were raked to the curb, but again, you're still dealing with the safety issue. There was also a machine that was kind of like a street broom in vacuum that actually not only picked up the leaves, but shredded them, composted them, and threw them into the back of a truck, kind of like a chipper when they process a tree. And then the third option was the bag program for leaves.
And of the equipment, we don't have any of that on hand, correct? We don't
Well,
have,
you
do we
have
a
street,
sweeper?
you certainly have loaders, and you have street sweepers. I mean, the street sweepers
But I
do
mean, like
what
the
they can.
vacuum, we don't have
But
any of
no,
that stuff.
No, in fact, we ran that trial for a couple of weeks and found it pretty much unsatisfactory. It's fine, like if you were in a flat street, but anything with any kind of curve to it or potholes or anything like that, it was not very, very effective in picking up leaves.
You guys good? Good. Thank you, Don.
How was the leaf program this spring?
We picked up a lot of leaves in comparison to what we normally do, but again, that was the aftermath of last fall. There were a lot more leaves to deal with than what historically there have been.
3 times the tonnage of the year before?
Well, maybe the previous year was a successful fall, and of course, precipitation plays a big role, leaves being wet and such. So it varies from year to year.
Yeah, you guys got to see the graph. It was the heaviest usage of the spring cleanup in, I don't remember how many years were on that sheet. The graph was at least 5 years.
Yeah. The spring program was not approved by the council originally. If you look at the old resolution, it was about a fall program. It was my decision to do a spring program as well because you have late dropping trees. You always have people calling, you're starting the program too early, you're starting it too late, you quit too soon, my trees still have their leaves on them. These aren't even my leaves, these are my neighbor's leaves.
I have
And
that problem.
so what we did was I decided to go ahead and implement a 3-week program in the spring immediately prior to the citywide cleanup. And people complain about the program being too early or too late in the spring. You just can't control the weather. But we set the schedule, and that's what we go by as a schedule. We do the best that we can.
So this is just to adjust the cans,
All this is doing, we're still looking at
33
the
gallon cans. We're still
two
doing the
bags.
city provided can at this point, right?
Pardon me?
This isn't adjusting
This is allowing the use of 33-gallon cans, and it's also removing the allowance of the use of the cart.
Okay.
The wheeled cart. This is putting it strictly in the yard waste bags.
Aesthetically, I like our carts. I know you don't like them with the leaves in them, but it looks better than some of those leaf bags sitting all over. But
They won't be there long. They're gonna be getting picked up, so.
I know.
Are we good?
I'm good.
Can we move?
Yes.
I'm good. Okay.
Thanks, Don.
Thank you, Don. We have a public hearing set for May 20th for consideration of an ordinance rezoning a portion of property locally known as 705 Maple Street from C2, general commercial, to C1, limited commercial zoning district, which brings us to discussion items. Number 1 is the treasurer's report.
Class 81?
No, actually, she's class of 87.
Oh, I got it wrong.
The best class.
Right after 1980.
Okay, March's treasurer's report was in the packet. I don't know, there's nothing that's really out of the ordinary on it, so if you guys have any questions, General fund, of course, we got property tax in, which will be reflected in the next one. So the other things that are just normal things that are like our timing for property maintenance and vehicle maintenance are internal service funds.
Are we waiting on any other monies?
We're always waiting on other monies.
Well, big money?
Not really big money.
Why do you ask?
Well, yeah.
Well, I don't really think I want to address that publicly, but, no.
No, I mean, like, the depot will have 75,000, if you look on your
No, okay.
projects, there's like a grant that's coming in, that's 75,000, that will get up to 85,000 that we're,
Yeah, I was talking bigger dollars. I'm good.
you're good. Anybody else?
One account that is running at, and I didn't look at your stuff, so I don't.
Okay, which one are you looking at?
Your, for the flood. We're running a deficit out there in that account right now.
6911, yes.
What's the size of the deficit out there right now? Do you know? We haven't,
Yeah.
oh, that
Yeah,
hasn't
you
gone through
can't-
yet. So
yeah.
it's gonna be like 70-ish in the whole.
Yes, somewhere around there.
And by the, depending on what goes forward, this spring, and I know Nick's gonna be talking about some additional efforts he's gonna have to do. If we don't have a disaster declaration that's done that encompasses our county, that hits the time frame for some of the efforts that we do, we're gonna sit with probably a good $100,000 deficit that we're gonna have to address. It may not be this fiscal year, but at some point, we're gonna have to make that right.
How much of that would we have to address if we got the declaration?
15%, depending on the
Yeah,
the
it
reimbursement
depends on the-
percentages, and it
right.
depends from one declaration to another.
And when the work was done, I mean, there's different levels.
And
Yeah, so they'll be hustling.
And it sometime, we've ended up with going through the process, and the way they allow us to account for things, we cover some of our costs just as operations, and then we get a reimbursement, and we've ended up actually with surpluses at times. It's helped us to purchase other items for flood protection.
Yeah, it just depends on how they organize it, because you get to use equipment and man-hours and,
And on cleanup side, we're counting normal operations that you wouldn't normally get to
correct.
get reimbursement for. And so every flood's different. I do just want to point out, though, that that's something that if we don't have that declaration, we're going to have $100,000. It's going to be a hit to the general fund that we don't have an identified manner to take care of.
Can I declare? Can I make that declaration? It needs to be higher up? Okay, all right.
Do we need to reach out to someone then, Jim, as council?
It's all a matter, for that's all a matter of damage.
Okay.
And what gets expensed, and they'll look at that on the majority of the western counties have already got a disaster declaration. Our side hasn't, just because the dollar amount hasn't hit high enough levels. And that can be done on a countywide basis and then on a statewide basis. And
Right.
And do we even know our real cost yet until it's all
Not-
said and done and the
Yeah.
ESCOs are taken down and we figure out
That's going up
how many
another
are good and how
Our-
much are
weekend.
bad?
Our cost won't be enough to get a declaration on its own,
Okay,
so.
Are we good?
yeah,
Thanks.
thank you.
Thanks, Annette. Number 2 is spring CVB update. Chelsea, the baby.
So cute.
When's that due date, Chelsea?
June 10th, so we're getting there, getting close. So Chelsea LaRue, Greater Burlington Convention and Visitors Bureau, and I'm just here tonight to give you guys the spring CVB update, as I'm here twice a year. So we'll start out with some of the boring numbers and things, but we did have good news last fall when the economic impact of the travel industry was released by the Iowa Economic Development Authority. Fiscal year 17 numbers reached $138.9 million of visitor expenditures for Des Moines County. So as we'll move in, even though we saw some lower numbers on things in other areas, we still had really good visitor expenditures for the county. Continue to be ranked 13th out of the 99 counties in Iowa, and tourism brought in over $9 million in state and local taxes. Woohoo! Yes, well, woohoo to that. Some other 2018 by the numbers, CVB was able to award out over $85,000 in grants, and this was to 34 different events within our community. Some of these dollars are monies that we received from the state for the sports grant opportunities, and then other dollars were programs that the CVB implements out of our budget. So we had the community event funding program where we awarded about $20,000. And then in 2018, the CVB did decide to do a one-year grant program called the Incentive Fund. We knew there were a lot of organizations in our community that had new management or new drive to try new things, and so that was a grant that they could apply for any time throughout the year, whereas community event funding is a once-a-year opportunity. So we were able to award some new events, some organizations trying some new things. I know the auditorium did some new things with those dollars, so that was exciting to try to get some new things to our community. These 34 events brought in just shy of 69,000 visitors, and we know those visitors stay about 1.5 days in our community. We're kind of a weekend destination place, and those events help drive over 10,000 hotel room nights, so that's exciting for our community, which helped create a $15.2 million estimated economic impact. We mailed out over 11,000 community guides last year. These are direct guide requests based on our ad placements that we do. The biggest partnership that we had is with the State Tourism Office. Now when somebody is requesting the state tourism guide, they can also request ours as well. So we're seeing a really huge impact for that. The guides were mailed out to 29 different countries and all 50 states, including Washington, D.C., Puerto Rico, and the U.S. Virgin Islands. So we are getting an international eyes on our community. And the digital community guide had really good numbers as well. Visitors are spending about 8 minutes average within the guide, so they're definitely diving in deep and trying to figure out what they're gonna do to come here. And the top cities include Burlington, so while they're already here, they're looking through the guide to find more things to keep them here longer. Annapolis, Maryland, Des Moines, Davenport, and Chicago. The Welcome Center had about 10,500 visitors, and visitors came from all 50 states and 35 different countries. So not only is our print material getting international eyes, but international visitors are coming to our community, which is very exciting. The Welcome Center hosted 12 different groups, and we did continue the bike rental program in 2018 with Nick's Cycling and Fitness, but we have decided to discontinue that program at the Welcome Center. Thanks to John now implementing a program at the marina, we felt his hours were better suited for visitors, so we're gonna let them take that over.
Yeah, I was gonna say, we had 20, so we'll look for that number to rise.
That's exciting, yeah, good job. And we were also a ticket outlet for Civic Music for part of the year in 2018, but now Civic Music has also transitioned to Ticketmaster along with the auditorium. And so Ticketmaster has a few new rules, and we are no longer allowed to be a box office. We're still working hard to get visitors into the Welcome Center, though. Hotel Motel tax collections for the last fiscal year was about $763,591. You will see that is a drop from the previous year, but we're still coming off of that decline with Iowa Fertilizer and the large construction projects and things as well.
And through the first 6 months of the next fiscal year, we're on pace for 830,000. And from what I've seen for, at least what I've heard from the hotels, is that the numbers yet the first few months in this calendar year are higher than that. So it's like a 20%, we're on pace for a 20% increase.
Yes. Numbers so far in 2019 have been really good.
Yeah.
And I guess that's moving into this slide. Occupancy for 2018 did sit about 51% for the year. But we do have to remember as well, in June of 2018, we had a brand new hotel come online, 69 rooms. And so that automatically skews our occupancy numbers. We won't have true year-to-date occupancy numbers until July 2019. So even though you see that occupancy is down, when you look at rooms actually sold, that really was only a decrease of 3.5%. Rooms actually sold in the community for the year was over 150,000 rooms. So it's an average of 413 rooms a night. And it was very exciting. Right at the beginning of the year, we were finally able to wrap up Fireball Run. Team Burlington, we got to see you on the big screen there. We got to do a premiere party in January, bringing Team Burlington back out. It was very exciting to have our missing child's, Aaron Pospisil's grandparents in town as well. So that was very touching. And the episodes are now on Amazon Prime, so if you haven't gone out to watch them yet, go do it. I feel that Fireball Run represented our community very well, and the locations that got to be featured were Weingard, Great River Entertainment, the Heritage Center Museum, Burlington Trailways with their driving simulator, Kenny's Roller Ranch, and of course Snake Alley. So thanks for the partnership and making that possible, and we're excited to see what more can come from that. So that's kind of the numbers before we look ahead to what's on our plate for 2019. Do you guys have any questions about?
I do have one. Can I get one of those cutouts of Mayor McCampbell from Fireball Run?
I only purchased one and I let him keep it, so you're gonna have to fight him
All
for
right,
it.
I'll get with you later.
Do you want it for a dartboard?
You're a jerk.
Do you want it for-
You want one of Shane or of you?
No, Shane. Gonna put it in the car with me. Go ahead.
Okay, we're gonna move on. So, as
Let's move on.
some of you have probably heard, 2019 is a jam-packed year for us. And some of the first things we're going to be working on are Riverboat Dockings. And I want to say thanks to Councilman Billups again for helping us recruit the Nina and the Pinta to our community. These are Christopher Columbus replica ships. They were last year in 2016, and they will be docking in June again.
Sweet.
So those will be exciting. They're kind of floating museums, so they'll work with school groups and daycares, and of course be open to the public as well. So.
Yeah, they're cool to be on.
And we'll have 5 dockings of the American Queen and the American Duchess. The American Queen is the 450 passenger vessel, and the Duchess is their sister ship, the 260 passenger vessel. So they'll be spending their time in our downtown with their guided tours and just exploring the area that way. Then in July, we're bringing back the Very Vintage Market. That is the one-day extravaganza in downtown Burlington where the streets are locked down with anything repurposed, reimagined, vintage, you name it. It's for sale that day. There's about 120 vendors that are registered, and it's estimated to bring about 7,000 attendees to our community from we know as far away as a 120-mile radius. So it's definitely gaining more and more traction every year. And we're excited to be bringing back Gus Macker again for the second year. We're year 2 of our 3-year contract. Year 1 was really successful for us. We had 138 teams, which brings 544 total players. I think I saw a few familiar faces down there on
We
those
killed
courts.
it last year. It wasn't
my
for
first
having the weak
basket
link
ever.
sitting down the end. We
I
would've won the
got my first
championship.
basket ever. Just want you to know, for the record.
Well, registration is open. If City Holler Ballers want to make a comeback, we can get you a team again, make that happen. We do estimate about 2,000.
Jill, I just have one question. If the City Hauler Ballers play again, do we have to have Jim?
You guys can control your team.
We could have won if it wasn't for you, James. I don't want to bring up old things. Let's
Did he
continue.
play center? I was just curious.
Power forward.
It's like having Muggsy Bogues.
Let's just move before things really start getting ugly here. A sinner.
We estimate there were about 2,000 spectators down there for the weekend, and players and spectators came from 8 different states. So it did have a huge draw to our community. And the hotel saw about a 53% average occupancy increase that weekend. We specifically selected the first weekend in August because it is a light weekend out at the Recplex, so we knew we wouldn't be competing for hotel rooms, plus bringing in occupancy on what is traditionally a lower weekend. So we're excited to bring that back. And here's kind of a zoomed in map of where the players came from. We had a good cluster down in the Quincy, Hannibal, St. Louis area, good cluster in the Peoria area. We do direct mail postcards to about 4,500 past Macker players, specifically targeting the Iowa, Illinois, and Missouri addresses. Peoria, we saw a really good draw from that area because this is year 3 now that they do not have a tournament anymore. So those players are looking for a new home
Peoria
location.
doesn't have a tournament?
No, they discontinued it a couple years ago, and so now their players are kind of looking for a new place to come, and they were really pleased with our community. So we'll let them keep coming back. We are working on that team recruitment right now. Like I kind of mentioned, registration is open, so you'll see us out in the community. Mackerman might be showing up in a few places here soon, and we'll do some advertising and things for that as well. And now moving on to the big one, RAGBRAI. So every year, communities are selected to host RAGBRAI through a bid process, and RAGBRAI sends out the packets to chambers, CVB offices, and some city entities. So the CVB does bid on behalf of the entire Greater Burlington community. And in 2017, I will admit we did not bid, but that was due to the flood wall construction. We didn't want riders on top of that construction, but I think Councilwoman Murray, you did inquire, so thank you for reminding us that this is an important event for our community.
And I am so excited that we're an overnight town for the first time.
I know, that is very exciting.
Very exciting.
This is the 6th year that Burlington has hosted RAGBRAI, and the very first time that we were an overnight. Also in that bid packet, we do include a letter from the cities, and this year, Mayor McCampbell, you did include your support in that, so thank you. And when we started hearing rumors last December that there was a good chance we'd be selected, the partnership team got together and decided it'd probably be a good idea for us to purchase a table and make an appearance in Des Moines, and so some city staff were able to join us. So Jim, thank you, and it's already starting off as a huge community project, so in a good partnership in that project. So for those that don't know what RAGBRAI is, it is the Register's annual Great Bicycle Ride across Iowa, and when they say Register, that is the Des Moines Register. It is a division of that newspaper. This is its 47th year of riding across Iowa, and about 20,000 riders participate every year. So we'll have 20,000 extra people in our community on July 26th. Over 300,000 riders have pedaled almost 200,000 miles since it started, and the largest one-day count was in 2013 with 36,000 riders. And RAGBRAI does garner an incredible amount of media attention because of their network within the newspapers. And most recently, they did have an ad in the New York Times with our community listed right there with it. So we are getting some good media attention out of them as well. And RAGBRAI is one of those events that you never really know who's participating and who you might get to see, what you might get to learn. And just the other day, our staff was having a conversation with a local business owner. And that last time RAGBRAI was in town, that business owner just started a conversation with what they thought was a couple writers. Come to find out, they wrote for the Chicago Tribune. And since then, they've maintained a friendship, and those writers have continued to write stories about our local business. So that's kind of exciting there. So one of the first big things that we have to decide when we find out we're selected for RAGBRAI is what's our theme going to be? And so that, if you haven't seen yet, we just announced this a couple weeks ago. And since we were not an Indian community this year, we knew we did not want anything with the river because we didn't want to take that away from Keokuk. It's been a long time since they've had RAGBRAI, so we wanted to let them have that limelight there. So this is what we came up with. Have settled on Rally to the Alley because, of course, Snake Alley is one of our most famous landmarks. And envision pep bands, cheerleaders, pom-poms, flags, banners, good old-fashioned pep rally. That's how we're gonna theme and decorate the community for this event. So we're excited to bring that out. So planning for RegBri is a huge task. They keep reminding us it's a marathon, not a sprint. So we're trying to do little pieces as we go. RegBri does a really good job, though, at manning their communities with the right resources to ensure that this is done right. Every one of our chairs, staff have a huge manual, and that's what we're working off of. Their structure is for exec chairs, and we do have to thank Darren Grimshaw for being one of our exec chairs. He's overseeing law enforcement, medical, communications, transportation, and public safety. And then there are also 18 committees. And so we have to thank Braden Hill for the electrical chair, Nick McGregor with transportation, Wayne Thompson with the law enforcement, Nathan Toops with medical, and then Greg Johnson is serving on the sanitation committee. So thank you for allowing your city staff to support us in this project as well and making it a community-wide effort there. We do have regular meetings with RegBri, and they come to town every couple weeks. And May 1 is a huge deadline for us in the world of RegBri. That is when, so RegBri is based on a lottery system. Just because you register doesn't mean you get to participate. And so on May 1, they release the lottery of who made it in for the year, and the registered riders receive their RegBri number, or their wristband numbers. So on May 1, they can start requesting housing, they can start coming to our communities, and starting to check it out. So our website's gonna see huge traffic, so we're trying to get a lot of stuff done by then. And with that, I'm gonna hand it over to my counterparts here and let them take over.
Hello. So for the route, RegBri actually sets the route from Fairfield to Burlington. They work on that.
Can you give us your name?
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm Kay Sackville Brewer.
Thank you.
They actually set the route from Fairfield into the edge of town, and then our local law enforcement works to finalize that route within the community. So Major Grimshaw and his team at the Burlington Police Department, along with the West Burlington Police Department and Des Moines County Sheriff's Departments, are all working on those final details of that route as they make their way through the town. Being an overnight, it provides a lot of places where we need campgrounds and folks to stay overnight. So we're identifying those and working on those routes to get riders to those as safe as possible. That really is the number one concern, is making sure the riders are safe as they come into our communities. There will be obviously many street closures that will be needed. We have to get them across Highway 61, which is a major feat itself. So those folks are working on all of those routes. They will be coming into our community on Friday and exiting out on Saturday, basically the same way. We also have support vehicles that will have specific routes that will be determined. Those support vehicles are anything from an SUV, a pickup truck, a minivan, to a Penske truck or a Ryder truck, maybe even a semi, as they support all of the riders that they work with. And we also will have shuttle routes that will take place and take shape to get the folks from the campgrounds to the entertainment down on the riverfront. So you'll see those routes coming about. The next piece is our campground and our housing component. We have our main campgrounds will be at Burlington Community High School, Notre Dame Catholic Schools, and Edward Stone Middle School. We have several folks who have already been identified, and they will be staying at those locations. It also provides opportunity for commerce along Highway 61, and also those entities all provide storm shelters in case of any public safety or weather emergencies. We have camping also at Crapo and Dankwart Parks, and also at Southeastern Community College. Additionally, we have to place about 600 RVs, and so we just learned this morning that Westland Mall has signed on for our main RV location in their parking lot area. We currently are seeking local residents to host riders in their homes. That's one of the neater experiences that lots of folks get to have an opportunity with. We have a need for about 400 homes to accommodate about 1,000 riders that when they come into the community. Those are the folks who want to set their tents up in people's backyards. They're looking for a real bathroom and shower. That's kind of a nice amenity that they choose. They also have some of them will want to sleep inside someone's house, blow up an air mattress and stay with those folks. So it's a great way to meet people from all around the world and really create some lasting, unique relationships. And all registered riders will get their wristband numbers, which Chelsea mentioned. And then they, by being a registered rider through RAGBRAI, have signed a liability waiver, so it takes the liability off the homeowner if they're registered with RAGBRAI.
Rachel and Dean with the Greater Burlington Partnership. Now we get to talk about the fun stuff. So we have partnered with Burlington Riverfront Entertainment to host the party along the riverfront. So that means live entertainment from 2 p.m. to about 11:30 midnight. There will be food vendors set up similar to a Steamboat Days that we're accustomed to along the west side of the parking lot, Front Street, and along Jefferson Street. We'll also be accommodating a ton of bike parking. So we're working on a lot of those details. I'm missing something. Oh, the Snake Alley. So Snake Alley is our theme and the riverfront is the party. The hospitality committee is working on incorporating Snake Alley, whether it be riding up Snake Alley, doing some kind of photos, but there will be a lot of focus around Snake Alley. But we're looking forward to a fun time. I think there's 5 or 6 bands total, and we have a great partnership with Burlington Riverfront Entertainment.
Spasmatics, nobody told me about the Spasmatics.
Oh, I'm sorry, I missed over that. Yes, they are. The Spasmatics is a cover band, 80s nerds, Spasmatics. So we're looking really forward to to having them. They'll be fun. So for more information, you can contact us at the partnership, info at burlingtonragbrai.com. There is still lots of planning left to be happening. As Chelsea mentioned, RAGBRAI keeps reminding us that it is a marathon, not a sprint. We want to thank you for all of your partnerships with city staff. We couldn't do it without them. And I think it is a great example of how cities and nonprofits can work together to provide a great experience for all of our visitors. Now, do you have any questions for the 3 of us?
I have a question, but I don't have a comment, though. The Snow Bowl, they made me the Grand Marshal, so.
So,
I don't think they have a parade.
Thanks.
So anyways, just, I wasn't sure.
just FYI.
I wasn't sure if you knew that, so.
Hey, Chelsea,
Anybody
I
else?
I
noted.
have a couple questions, Shane.
I do too.
I'm gonna have to rely on my
You
counterparts. too.
might answer my questions here. Go ahead.
I know that RAGBRAI, when it first started and its inception, was free, and you saw a lot of people that didn't have any money. It was the poor man's vacation, and now RAGBRAI is actually quite expensive, and these people come to our communities and they drop a good deal of money. Does anybody have any figures on what the average cost is per day that the RAGBRAI rider spends? I'd wager it's over $100 per
I know they've
community.
done a study, but I don't have those numbers in front of me.
Okay, that's okay.
We can't charge for camping. I don't know if that's
No, I
something,
know
so
that, I know that. I want people to get excited, because these people,
The economic impact will be huge.
these people do
yes.
have money.
Yep.
One of the things that RAGBRAI has, told us about is this is a more affluent group because it is so expensive, so they tend to be clean and tidy. They do have dollars to spend in the community, and they really make this their big vacation of the year, so.
Yeah.
I had about 40 people staying in my yard and house the last time I was here. And I didn't get home till late. They were all settled in, and some of them were out in the yard having fun, and we joined them for a while, but at 6:30 in the morning, they were all gone, and you couldn't tell anybody was there. So I guess the pitch is they're really consider hosting, because you're right, you meet a lot of great people.
We hear that they clean up after themselves.
They clean up after
everywhere
themselves.
They go,
It was great.
And then my next comment just has to do with Snake Alley. I think it could be really, really fun if we charge them like $5 a person, let them ride their bike, walk up the snake, whatever they want to do, then give them a little medal at the top. Says, I conquered the snake, Burlington, Iowa, put our webpage information on there. Because it's all about the hardware, baby. If we give them a little metal, they're gonna remember Burlington, Iowa for the rest of their lives.
Good info. Matt, did you have a question?
My question is more for Chelsea. On the hotel motel stuff, how much of an impact are we seeing with the indoor recplex? Do we have any measurables at this point?
Yes, so in February, when they got up and running and they had the first couple softball tournaments, February alone saw a 25% increase in hotel occupancy.
Over the previous years?
And the two biggest weekends were the two big softball tournaments that they had at the turf. And then I just got March numbers the other day, and the March was up 15% over the previous year. So it's having really good impact for us.
That's part of where I wanted to also point out with the group, the board with the indoor recplex, to just note that the first 6 months prior to that going online, we had a 10% increase year over year. So not all of the increase is from that, but there is a significant impact. And I kind of want to point that out and make sure that you keep that in mind because there's still likely to be a request from that group asking for city funding out of hotel motel for capital or operations.
When do we expect to see that?
They mentioned that 3 years ago was something that was
no
noted
time
to me. I have no idea when or if that actually will happen. It's just, but it did come up in the last couple of months that request could be coming to the council.
Okay, thank you.
Are you guys good?
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Tremendous, guys, thank you.
Thanks for coming down, ladies.
We have an additional item with that. Eric is probably at some point, I don't know if this next agenda, gonna have a resolution for some action items from the city. Would that be accurate?
Primary one, from the park standpoint, currently city code does not allow camping in city parks except upon approval by council. So we'll have a resolution bring forward to allow camping in the parks for that night.
Okay.
Additional items that might be on that, and that might be that we just wait till the next work session so it has a chance for you to see it. We do need to have something that covers doing a special event permit. We typically do, our regular special event application is way different than what this really thinks about or contemplates. We're essentially closing all our parks. We're not doing rentals on any of the shelters. We have to do some comprehensive notations for street closures and where barricades are needed. Did we talk about what kind of fee we were charging? Was that like $3,000 or $4,000 that we're gonna charge?
At least, wasn't it?
Yeah. So, which comes into the in-kind that comes from the city. This is a different type of event than what we typically have. There will be a lot of city overtime that goes with this. Major Grimshaw's kind of been the one who's trying to keep track of the different areas where there could potentially be overtime from, the primary one will be the police department itself with traffic control, but the streets will have some time that's put into setting up and tearing down barricades and street signage. You're gonna have some transportation costs as well. I think that another group takes over later in the day.
We don't know the details on how that'll all work out.
So we will have a role at least for a portion of the day. And then the fire department, primarily on the ambulance side, making sure that we have adequate coverage, having a crew that's dedicated specifically for RAGBRAI. We've kind of put an estimate of what our in-kind type of overtime costs will be, and it's looking to be in that about a $16,000 range. We're hoping that's on the high side, and as they put it together, Major Grimshaw assures me that that's the high side, and some of it's doing some what-ifs depending on what happens with coverage from the hospital and getting volunteers from other sides and where we may have to fill in gaps. But we'll have some notations within that resolution authorizing us to, saying we're willing to cover the overtime that's associated with it, having one coordinated special event application, and then the park issue for camping out there. Does that make sense?
Anything else?
And then we'll do it again the next time we host overnight. Is that next year?
At Chelsea's next baby, that's. Are we good?
You're good.
Okay, thank you guys, ladies. Okay, city council pictures and council chambers.
Thank you.
See the white space? We still have space there.
So this is just to continue the conversation of when we do start the city council chamber remodels. We're gonna set two 70-inch TVs up right up here, so we need to find a new spot for the majority of those pictures. We're gonna keep the bottom row, probably get them to look nicer. So one of the things I thought about getting, possibly we could set this out in the hall, is to put, maybe the first 10 years of the pictures in that, in something like that where people could, at their leisure, go through them, take digital photos closer than, coming in here and looking at them that way. I know it was also brought up if you could put the pictures down the hallway. I mean, I think that's probably an option too, down the stairway if you wanted to frame them there. This wall is opened, if we just wanted to move them to that side or even up over there, we could arrange. So, again, I know a lot of people had different ideas. I don't know if you thought about it more or if you thought about anything
If you
different.
kept the bottom row, do you think you could put the other 15 of them over on that wall? Just vertically?
15, but, I mean, we could measure and see. If you wanted to keep them in the room, we could make it work in the room.
I know we're kind of attached and we're creatures of habit and we like how we've always had things. But I know I did the bulletin boards for the Y for 10 years and it broke my heart when they said we're doing away with the bulletin boards. We're just going for a cleaner, fresher, more streamlined look. They took all the bulletin boards down and you know what it does. It looks clean and fresh and streamlined. So I'm for this. I think this could look and work really nice for us. Our walls wouldn't be all cluttery.
I'm still the same. I'd like to leave it up. I just think, and I have a different thought process. But I like seeing the history on the walls, me personally, and that's just where I am.
I do too, but they make a good point. I mean, at some point in time, there's gonna be enough councils that have convened in these chambers. We're not gonna have walls. So it probably makes sense to go ahead and make the switch over into something like that.
Well, you're
If
gonna
we're
have
keep
a
'em.
combo, you're gonna have some of them up on the
Right.
wall,
Walls
just
and-
some of them in the display, correct?
And then
Right,
someday,
yes.
our photo will be in there, so,
Yeah.
sorry.
Well, one of the things I kind of liked about this too is it's portable. So, if we have an event at City Hall and we want to put it on the elevator and put it down on the first floor for people, if people aren't coming up here. I know City Day, we kind of do tour of buildings and stuff. That might be an idea. They don't have to just be in one location too. I mean, I wouldn't recommend leaving the building by any means, but I know we have all the mayor pictures downstairs. Maybe that could go on the first floor too to make it more convenient for people, but.
And sunlight can be really damaging on photos over time. They can get all faded out and all yellowed, and so that would help for longevity purposes, for historical purposes, keep them longer.
Well, let's go ahead and put it to bed. I still like it on the walls. I'm a wall man, but it sounds like I'm the only one saying that. So
Yep.
you guys are all groovy with,
I'm groovy with the combo.
We're groovy with the new
Right.
technology.
I'm okay with this.
So you're okay with moving
Yeah, I
forward
think
with
that would be more friendly for people to be able to actually see them up close. I mean, I'm not very tall, so it's hard for me to
Yeah,
see
I
that
mean,
top row.
well, that would be the
Yeah.
thing, if you moved a little higher, you're not gonna see them.
Yeah.
Yeah, no. I mean, and the older ones, they're further back, so they're already even harder to see
Yeah.
Yeah.
at that height. If a family member wanted to come and take a picture, it would be kind of hard, where
Yeah.
this would be better, so, okay, we'll just move forward that way.
okay,
Thank you.
thank you, Steph. Number 6 is 2019 ADA Improvement Project. Mr. McGregor, I'm gonna do that last.
He's gonna do it last, so you have more time.
This will take 2 seconds. This was a project that we were out to bid for, it was some sidewalk work. We received no bids, for this project, rather than have it as an action item. Just wanted to discuss that it will not be on the agenda next week.
Okay.
Our staff will try and do it by other means. I mean, we can shrink certain parts of the projects down and go out and get, written quotes.
What was the reason for that?
Why we didn't get it?
Yeah.
Some of the panels that we were placing, we were doing some parks projects where we had 2 or 3 panels. We had sidewalk, where we had a couple ramps to do. It was kind of strung out throughout town, so I don't know if it just wasn't that appetizing to a concrete contractor to run around and do a bunch of panel replacement, but.
There isn't a time constraint with the majority of the work, although around Mount
Street,
Pleasant Street Bridge.
to open it up and then to have to close it to do the sidewalk work, I really don't wanna have to do that.
Yeah.
So I would like to try and, that'll be our first priority, is to try and get the bridge sidewalk, try and buttoned up before the bridge opens up.
Now, is there sidewalk on both sides of that bridge, Nick? I was trying
East
to,
and west.
There is, yes.
okay, nice.
Okay.
You guys good?
Yep.
Thank you, sir. Okay, which brings us to number 5. I know some of you are here for that, Cascade Bridge. James, you wanna set the table for this?
Well, so after the last work session, as we kind of closed up the conversation and knew that we were moving, or likely moving down the road of closure of the bridge for pedestrian traffic, it was asked to bring back a discussion item for just discussing what's the future of that bridge. Is it something that you're, as a group, wanting to, given that it's a closed bridge, simply demolish? Is it something that you want to replace, or is it something you want to rehab? Where it sits currently on our schedule, it's not on our 5-year CIP. We have modeled it when Travis was here from Piper Jaffray, when we modeled what we can work in on a debt service schedule. He has it modeled in as a 2024 project for being able to finance and fit within our existing levies, and not put us in a spot where we're essentially making principal-only payments. And even at that point, at 2024, given the other work that we have on, primarily with the flood wall work, needing to do the borrowings that are associated with that, our debt capacity, we're really pushing the 70% usage of debt capacity limitation when we're out at 2024. Having a discussion about doing work sooner than that means that we will be violating the 70% usage that's within our financial policies. That's not the end of the world to be above that, as long if you're doing it from a conscious perspective. Typically, it'd be nice to see that, because you consider it an emergency, that you're going above that 70% usage, and you won't be there for a long period of time. Some of the options that are on the table would require us to be at or above that 70% level for the next 5 years. In fact, if you were to borrow to do a rehab of that, I think that you would, even 5 years out, you would, I think all 5 years, maybe only 4 years, you'd be above the 70% usage. Certainly would be only making only interest payments on all debt that's issued between now and 2024. And it kind of goes back to the way the 2011 bond issue was structured. It was a backloaded debt structure that was put in place when that bond issue was done. Not meaning that we were paying more in 2023, but we had a debt structure that had a fixed amount of debt that was the same amount every year moving forward from 2011 through 2023. So to do any new projects after 2011 was going to require an increase in property taxes, and we had it. Now, to work through it, though, we've had to we did some backloading on the first couple of issues. We've done away with doing so much backloading, but this would put us back into that position where we were doing all backloading to take on a project of this size at this point. I did point out, if you're trying to take this project on for either a rehab or a replacement project, that you would be doing that with new dollars, new property tax dollars, or some other dollar. You're talking about a project that, based off of the original costs, the rehab, or I'm sorry, the replacement numbers that were given by Klingner back in 2009, at that time was $3.5 million to $6.5 million for pure construction costs, no contingency, no engineering on it. Inflated out, including a contingency and engineering, those numbers are comparative to 6.1 to 10.2-ish million, give or take, you know. It's hard to inflate out over 10 years and have it, essentially you're looking more ballpark numbers than you are anything that's you would call a firm number. They're pretty realistic, but they're also ballpark. The report that was done on a rehab from Chuck Britson back in 2012, I think the estimate at that point was
The net value was
6.1 for the pure cost at that time. I don't have that. Yeah, I hate not having that with me, because you have it up, or you're going to go through it. Oh, I can let you worry about doing those numbers. But that's about to do a bond issue now is about an $8 million project on rehab when you do an all-in cost, inflation and adjusted. Those are high numbers. Again, if you're doing a project of that magnitude and you're trying to do it with property tax levy, to do it on a schedule where you're making principal and interest payments on time, you would be, the low end of that is about a 65% property tax increase. The high end is $1.30, depending on which option you want.
65 cents or 65%?
65 cents,
Okay,
I'm
that's
sorry.
a very important difference.
Or $1.30 on the high end. Travis modeled it for me, again, with no property tax increase, but that's only interest payments, and not just on this existing issue, but on all borrowings that we have between now and 2024. The other option that I put into the memo for you to think about, and this comes from a question that came from a council member about, could we go to a vote? Well, for a bond issue, we can't go to a vote. A GO bond issue for an essential corporate purpose, like a bridge, is a non-vote. It's purely a council decision item. Which it essentially means you can't ask for a vote on it. They're not going to put it on the ballot issue. What you could put, if you thought that you wanted to let the public decide, use a franchise fee to pay instead of a property tax increase. It doesn't get you around using more than 70% of the debt, our debt capacity, but it does get you around increasing property taxes. It also puts it into a spot where the voters decide if you want to have an increase of a cost item in order to pay for this bridge replacement. Doing the cheap end on the new bridge structure, I think I had in there 2%.
3%.
3%, yeah, 3%.
That would cover the debt service on just the electric, right?
On just the electrics, and
4% would cover.
4% would be for a rehab. And when you think about it, the first 1% is a wash. There's a local option sales tax, 1% on electric. If you put in a franchise fee, that first 1% goes in place, but the local option sales tax is eliminated. So you'd have to have it structured, that first percent made up for what's lost on the lost. The new 2% is about $600,000 On a 13-year basis, you could make the bridge repayments right in that neighborhood. 3%, which is where it's 4% fee, getting 3% net new would give you about 900,000, which would cover the rehab or the higher end.
Reconstruction, yeah.
Yeah, and still on right about that 13-year basis. I kind of give you that as a framework. Nick, you have a presentation to go over for some of the stuff. And I know you have a couple of other things besides just the financial side.
Yep, I was just gonna go over, the Klingner, 2009 report, shortly after the closure. The city council hired Klingner to do a report. And then 2012, there was another conversation about, a rehab, and then I'll go over that, and then there's a couple other items I'd just like to, address and talk about. So Klingner prepared a report, where they did 4 different bridge designs, 3 of which were concrete, 1 was a steel structure. Then there's a demolition cost in there. Something that I don't quite understand is the demolition cost in their breakdown versus what the true demolition cost was. And I'll address that. And then they did a couple of realignment sketches, and then I'll talk about that too. So if you'd hit the next slide. I don't want to argue with you, Jim, but in the end of it, they did talk about contingency and engineering in their estimates. Okay. Is it true to what would be today? I don't know. So I simply used the 3% inflationary rate on the amount done in 2009, moving forward annually. And so I highlighted 2019, and then I took it to 2024 just to give you a perspective of what that cost is between now and then. So $4.6 million bridge so there's a concrete bulb T bridge with the integral abutments and slope walls, and then there's the MSC, which is the mechanically stabilized earthen walls, and then there's a steel structure, which you can tell is a fairly significant increase over some of the other ones. But just wanted to give you that idea what that cost is. I won't go into all of that. If you'd hit the next slide for me. Then the demo. In the breakout on Klingner's report, they had it as $175,000, but then later they discussed $250,000 for demolition. I used $250,000 just as a point to start from in 2009, and you can see today's dollars. That's $335,000 for demolition.
Does that include the abutments on each end?
No, I think they discussed leaving them because of soil, because of stabilization.
But there'd be something additional besides that for what you'd have to spend to block that off so it appropriately.
Correct.
So.
Some more barricades and whatnot. If you'd hit the next one. So then they did some realignment looks. I didn't put both images, but kind of similar to a previous conversation we had about the bridge. They looked at that in their notes. Not a feasible option. There's quite a bit of slope, and to get a road to do that curve, you'd be purchasing a couple houses and demolishing them to build the roadway. So in the report, they didn't discuss kind of the dollar figures or what was going to be the reason for the infeasibility, but they did talk about that it wasn't feasible. If you'd hit the next slide for me, I'll hit the Shuck Britson report. They talked mostly about rehabilitation. They brought up replacement as from the Klingner report. They used $3.5 million as their base dollar figure for the cheap end bridge, and then they did a net present value. But if you'd hit that for me, so the replacement or rehab cost in 2012 was $6.1 million. They did not include engineering in the Shuck Britson report, so I added that. I think at 20% for also having administration over the project. So you can see what that does to the project. In today's dollars for rehabbing it is in the $9 million bracket to rehab it. And that does not take into consideration any of the degradation that's happened over the last 7 years. So could be some more money sitting out there as far as what could be spent on rehabbing it. So if you'd hit the next one.
And rehab's supposed to last about 50 years, Nick?
And that was the reason for the recommendation that they made. The 50 years for rehab, and then 80 years life cycle for concrete. Okay. And then they did a bunch of breakout stuff, which that report was in the packet. They talked about the net present value and the lifespan costs of the steel bridge versus the concrete bridge and whatnot. If you'd hit the next slide for me. And then other items, one of the things that was discussed was a pedestrian bridge to try and redo that, and then a trail project.
Were there any numbers put to the pedestrian bridge idea?
It's tough to do that, for one, but you're gonna need to have a lot of the same infrastructure.
Yeah.
In discussing it with Jesse, I guess the question that I have about some of the rehab conversations that we had also was to what end? What's the future of this area? Are we gonna only survive with a pedestrian bridge? Or do we want a vehicular bridge as well? Because if you're gonna install a pedestrian bridge in the future, hoping that you're gonna have a vehicular bridge, I don't know that you would have two independent structures. You know, you may install the base for both structures and then install just the pedestrian bridge. But to do just a pedestrian bridge is probably in the $2 million bracket. And that was just a rough conversation with Jesse on how that cost would work. I did do a trail. Jesse worked that out in CAD. I will apologize. I'm the one that drew the image off to the left. He had it in CAD and didn't have time to print it out and for it would look nice. And he said, well, I had 2 or 3 switchbacks on the north side and then I had 4 on the south side. So I just wanted to give you an idea of what that would be. You can see Eric threw in the contour map. To be able to get ADA compliant, you're gonna have to have switchbacks to get it down through there. And all that does is increase the length. And so in the next slide, you can see what that means for money. There's some retaining wall work too that you'd have to do. $836,000 for a trail that, it's about 2,000 foot long when you add the switchbacks in. So, and that was just a conceptual drawing, so you'd still have to go to engineering but that was full cost with engineering and contingency. So I think that was my last slide. I'm just talking about kind of what we have in front of us as far as replacement rehab and some other type of work that you could do to reestablish pedestrian traffic.
Okay. James?
I'll just say that it's kind of in your ballpark as to how you want it to proceed and what route, because I don't know that you have one solution that is a magic one that all of you are gonna be able to be happy with, or the whole community is gonna be happy with. So what's the nature of compromise, and that's really your conversation as to where you wanna see that move.
So I guess the real big question to probably start with is pedestrian or traffic?
I'm ex-nam pedestrian.
You know what, I'll go with where I'm at on that. If we're gonna build a bridge, let's build a bridge,
Okay.
right? I'm not interested in a pedestrian-only bridge.
So as a group, I think that's probably a consensus, because I kind of feel the same way.
Yeah, if we're gonna be
There's
putting
not
up
enough
that kind of money.
savings there for me to
Right.
say
I
pedestrian
agree
only.
with you.
So then the question is, do we move it forward or keep it where it's at? Now, Jim brought up an option as far as having a vote and letting the community determine whether or not it's a priority to take on the debt today or to keep it where it's at. I'm okay with allowing that to proceed, as long as we're also taking steps to recognize that it probably needs to be demolished regardless of whatever that vote is, because of the risk associated with it continuing to stand there.
I would, Matt, I was probably the guilty party that started talking about a vote, because I was wanting, to be honest with you, I don't have strong feelings one way or another. I do and I don't. I mean, I loved Cascade Bridge. I used it as a kid. I used it when it was open. But to be honest, I've gotten by with, like most of Burlington, gotten by without it. But that doesn't mean it's any less important. So to me, I think we're to the point where safety-wise and liability-wise, it's demolish, and then replace it. Now, I'm gonna be honest with you, I'm gonna be for the low-cost bridge, because the view from the bridge is what I care about. I don't care about looking down through it, and I want a bridge that's gonna last a long time. So as far as the structure, I'm gonna be for the lower-cost concrete bridge. I think we ought to demolish it. I think we ought to replace it. Then, to me, it gets down to the point of when.
And that's where I think.
And that's the next step. So
2020.
we cannot afford to do it until we wait to 2024 unless we put it to a franchise fee
One thing to
vote.
keep in mind though, is that 2024 number isn't a hard number.
I know
mean,
it's not
it's a
hard.
plan at this point.
It's a plan, it's not even
But
in the CIP.
that's assuming that hotel motel tax and sales tax revenue do what we want or have to have them
Yeah.
do in order to be able to afford it.
I got you.
The only guaranteed route is the approval of what Jim has suggested is the franchise fee, which would allow us to create new money to do it, or raise property taxes.
The
And
constitu-
I'll
Oh,
be,
go
I'll
ahead,
be
Matt.
honest, I cannot support a property tax rate increase for this project, given where we currently are in the state on our tax per thousand. We're already on the higher end. In fact, I think we're number 3 in the state. I can't support being the highest for that project.
The constituents that I talked to said they do want to see it replaced.
And that's why I
So
think,
I think that's important.
I've had a number of people say to me, don't replace it at all. I've had a number of people say, put in a pedestrian bridge or put in a trail. Well, now we've seen that a trail costs almost $1 million, so that's not near as marginally saving.
Yeah.
And I've had a number of people say replace it in 2024, and I've had a number of people say replace it today. And I think if we allow it to go to a vote, then that will essentially allow everybody to have a voice as to whether or not that's going to be the case.
Whether they want to wait or go ahead now.
I
What would-
agree, because I think if we just wait, it's kind of like the latest Christmas gift, you know, you've got to have it, you got to have it, you got to have it, and the months and the years go by, and it takes a diminishing interest, and it fades away again, and I think that's what's happened for future councils.
I agree with
And
you,
I think we
John.
need to move on this issue while the issue is hot.
The infrastructure choice has to be the most cost-effective choice. But essentially, I mean, if the citizens of this, if were to approve that option, then it would have to be the lowest cost
Yeah.
item because of the position it would put us in.
What would be the cost, Jim, as far as for administration of allowing a special vote if we did pursue the franchise fee?
I think the special election is in the, I want to say 8,000, somewhere in that neighborhood. Trying to make a guess from what it cost the last time we went through that process. In terms of getting public input, that's not a high cost.
Yeah.
What would the timeline be? Let's assume for a
It
second.
has to fit within their schedule
Okay.
for the vote. You do a you have to you'd have to pass an ordinance. Actually, I'd want to talk to Alliant to make sure they got the steps correct. It's an ordinance. That's something that can be done either proactively asking for a vote or subject to the reverse referendum. And it can be put in place, you specify what you want to use the funds for. In this case, you would word it to where the first % would be, I would word it for how it's talked about, public safety purposes. The first 1% as an offset to what Lost currently provides towards public safety. And the remainder you could be as specific as bridge replacement, repair, and maintenance costs. I'd want to talk to Alliant to see about whether you can have it set up to where you have the rate go in place effective, say October 1 this year, and then have a date where it's sunsetted out, if you wanted to have it sunset out in 13 years, or you could leave it indefinite and let a future council worry about that.
I'd like
I mean,
to
it's
sunset
13
it out
that's what's
personally.
13 years
so
is a
far.
long
Yeah,
time.
I want it to go away when we're paid
If you
off.
want to say that it's specifically for that and it does go away, that's
yeah.
something that you
Definitely.
can have that worded to do.
Now, can we have it
Um,
as specific as to say for
I-
that
I wouldn't
bridge?
say for that bridge specifically, just because your dollar amount is, you don't know what your cost is gonna be. You don't know, what the actual dollars coming in off of that franchise fee for that period of time are, but you're gonna have to specify a period of time. So I'd wanna structure it to where you're getting the right dates so that you're in the ballpark to do it for what you're looking at for the cost here. But if you limit it, you can limit it towards the bridge costs, and that way you're using it for the ongoing, if there was an overage, you're still saying, we're gonna use it to maintain our existing bridges. And I don't know how else to get it to where you're getting it limited enough without putting some strings on that
Right.
are too cumbersome.
What, does it make sense to maybe broaden it a bit and just have it focused
You can
strictly
have
on
it for,
city infrastructure?
you can have it for city infrastructure, but then you're gonna have to communicate to the public that you're not gonna violate.
Well,
the
it
intent.
would be for that bridge, but my only concern would be any abutment work or any road work that has to do with the bridge. Is that cut out if we start to do that?
If you have it for the bridge, I think you're gonna be okay if
Okay.
it's for
Alright.
the structures that are adjacent to
Okay.
it. Just from the intent of what you're talking about, but.
I mean, we can call it a franchise fee, it's still a tax.
Yeah.
And I have, my gut knee-jerk reaction is that it would not pass. But I would be interested in allowing the public to vote on that rather than just the five of us. The thing is we've alluded to before, we've come so far from where we are at financially as a city, during your tenure, and I'd hate to see us start making steps backwards, at this point in time as far as some of our financial policies. So at this point in time, I'd be for the lowest cost replacement bridge. It's not gonna be popular, demoing the bridge we had, and I'm probably going to say, wait until 2024. However, I would like us to be the council that continues to work on it, so when 2024 happens, we're ready to rock.
So are we all in agreement that if it doesn't pass, that we would wait till 2024? Keep it in the CIP then?
Well, I mean,
As
you
a
can look at
traffic-
it.
As a vehicle,
Yeah, I
vehicular
think you
traffic
could,
bridge?
I think you
I
could
think
look
that's
at it
the only
year
way we
after
can do it.
year, if your sales tax rebounds and your hotel motels tax helps out.
And do we all agree that regardless of the turnout, we need to probably take the steps necessary to remove the existing structure?
Absolutely.
I agree. What did staff have to say about their removal of the bridge?
Staff,
Well, even in that first report from Klinger, in there
it
it said,
suggested it.
in there it said it would crumble under its own weight eventually.
Eventually.
The one call I have into the DOT is if you were to remove the bridge, and then try and apply for the funding for the $1 million. I have not had a response back. If you remove a structure, I mean, I believe that you could say because of the integrity of the bridge, it was deemed it was necessary.
Timing.
Can you get that $1 million?
Right.
What I would do right now, because we're at a point where we could say we're interested in the bridge replacement funds now, we'd have through 2023 to get that accomplished.
But-
So we could do, I think, if we put ourselves and say we're willing to accept the funds now, do the demo now, and over the next 3 years, we would be eligible because we're in that process, I think.
So, but if,
That's one that we could check on.
Correct.
I'd like to check on that,
Yeah.
that's for sure.
let's assume for a second that it's approved, franchise fees approved by the citizens of Burlington at some point in time this year. We would be in the planning and bidding stages with probably within 8 months of that vote? Fair enough to say?
You would be
So if
going
we-
out,
So
you
if we
would,
removed it today, is the timeline close enough that we wouldn't have a problem with that? And the reason I ask is, let's say we wait till 2024, the inflation and the value there is more than $1 million anyways. Right? I mean, our cost is $1 million higher today, or higher in 2024 than it is today, just because of inflation.
I'm not really sure if I'm tracking, but if we've been contacted again to see if we're interested in accepting funds, because they go through a cycle and we're eligible for the funds now. If we accept them now, we could do the demo after we've entered a
After we
contract with
accepted
the
it.
state. We could do that demo now, and it wouldn't cause us to lose that funding if we didn't do the rebuild for another year or two or whatever. But there is an end date. They want us to have that bid. If we accept the funds, they want us to use it within,
Well, it's bid within
I
3
think it was-
days, but then I think there's a window for construction to begin.
I
So you
think
couldn't
it's
bid
3
and let a contract sit
I think
in
it's
the
3
wind for a
years.
year.
I think it's 3 years that we have to get the construction done. But that would be one that we'd have to verify.
Well, I would like to definitely would like to check that out.
And so was your question on?
I'm just saying
on
that-
let's say it was approved to begin the design of the bridge, what's the duration of that design?
No, what I'm asking, and based off of the charts that you provided, taking into account inflation and time value of money, that if we waited till 2024, our cost was gonna be $1 million higher anyways, which eats up most of the value that we have in that grant money today, should we not get it, correct?
Correct.
Okay, that's what I was alluding to.
Well, I, as far as the demo goes, I had one of the former council people who was on council at that time said, and I think we reached out to all of us, said, hey, good job, we should have closed it back then. I don't think we can gamble any longer on that. I think we should plan on demoing it, but I would like to see if we couldn't secure those funds, as Jim was stating, at least have the possibility of doing that. Who knows, in 2024, it could be that we wouldn't be in a better financial position, or it could be we'd be in a great financial position by then, continuing to make improvements, and maybe we would be able to swing it a little earlier. But I'd like to be able to work on it and go ahead, but I don't think, I know that my personal opinion anyway, I don't think we can just say, okay, we're gonna forget our financial policies that's brought us back from the brink of bankruptcy to do this bridge, because it's not a high traffic bridge. As much as I like it, as much as I'd like to have it there, I just can't see it. That's my opinion, where I'm at on it.
I've already given mine, but I mean, I can give it again. Just wanna give it all that strong, because again, you guys are gonna have to probably deal with it more than me. But
So we've agreed franchise fee then?
well,
I
is that
would
what
say
you guys, is that
John
what you
says
guys
no.
said?
Is that
To allow
what-
for the vote.
You were out of the room.
I'm willing, I'm willing to let the citizens vote on it, yes. If it's, I don't wanna say only $8,000, cause that sounds bad, but if it's $8,000, that's less than what I thought for a special election, and I would be willing to let the citizens vote and decide whether they wanna tackle that funding mechanism.
And you're not.
What's that?
I agree with John. I think it goes to special election, and then,
It's,
essentially, if it's not approved, if referendum does not pass, then it's 2024, assuming that everything we need to lines up.
yeah, I'll be honest with you, it's a tax.
Regardless
And
of
I'm not
bridge
in favor of a tax, but because of all the input I've received, and I think you all have, and it's yay, nay, it's in between, it's in the middle, it's a
Yes.
hot point, I would just as soon let the people vote on it rather than the 5 of us.
Yeah, it's
So,
all over the board.
Yeah.
And I was elected to grow this town, not shutter it, so I think we need to put it before a vote, and if people want to have their access to their beautiful parks open, let's get her open.
Again,
That's
I'll have to
majority,
figure,
James.
I'll have to figure out what's the steps that you have to
Correct.
go through to get us to that point. There will have to be some level of action taken by the council prior to it going out to a vote, but that also then is subject, whenever we get through our steps, then submitting it to the county, and they have to fit it within their election calendar for what are open eligible dates.
Right.
So that will be a few months for that to occur.
Yep.
it's better than what we've been doing the last 10 years.
Yeah. For sure.
Okay,
How quick do you think we can see action on the demolition of the existing structure then? We're gonna have to wait to hear from the state? Is that where we're at on
I
that?
think that we'll make contact with the state and find out what the appropriate timing is on that. They have to accept funds, there's a contract that needs to be approved between us and the state for that funding based off, it's been a while since I read that email, but I think that's essentially what that said. And then we'll just have to have a discussion with them, what the timing is on what they say is appropriate for us taking different actions. if we're trying to make sure that we maintain eligibility for that funding. The other part of that is that to do a demo, we're gonna need to get an engineering contract put together, and that's gonna take some time too.
Yeah.
Okay.
It wasn't discussed in the engineering report, but that road is access to a residence down there, and then the boat club. I've actually spoken with the boat club. I have not spoken with the residents. You could probably have demolition occur during certain periods of time, but you probably have the bridge at a certain point where it's gonna be encompassed over the whole roadway. So I don't know how to give the access to the property owners down there. Supposedly there was an old road further to the south, but that may be something that's a part of the cost that you have to try and absorb as far as demolition. So I don't know how you do that. We would have to look into that.
Thanks for bringing that up.
How many residents are down there, Nick?
There's one cabin down there where they live permanently, and then there is, the boat club. But my largest concern is the primary residence.
Well, but if they have a dock, or the boat club has a dock, and they have river access, possibility we might be able to work out something there where they could actually use river access to get to another point if we had to do that, because since it's only one resident. So I mean, that's something we can look at that time.
I just wanted to bring it to your
Yeah.
attention in case we need to provide access to them. In other construction projects, we do not, with road construction projects, we do not provide access, to their driveway.
Sure.
But this is a little bit
It's
different
a little tough, yeah, they
It's a
only
little
got
bit
one
different
spot.
circumstance when you shut down their
Yeah.
only access.
Well, and I think a lot of that's gonna be determined by how long it's gonna actually take to take the bridge down.
Yeah,
Right.
that's what I was
Correct.
getting at. Temporary time, might be able to endure that for a week or two, if you had to. I'm gonna be voting in later this week, so I'll understand, but.
All right. Does anybody have any issues with appointments?
No.
Mr. Tisland? Peanut butter.
The only thing on that appointment, that other person will be notified because of the ratio, right? Wasn't somebody wanted to come back in, but then, am I looking at this wrong? So remember, we had a little problem with that last time. I just want to make sure there's not any hard feelings.
Yeah, everything's good there.
Okay. Then, coming up Thursday, farmer's market starts. So I didn't get a chance to find out what they're gonna have to sell, but I bet there'll be fresh asparagus and some other wonderful edibles for you to put on your grill, so check it out.
Counselor,
I've spoken my piece today.
MPT.
Got nothing tonight. Thank you.
Counselor,
Nothing.
James?
I get to be on the radio this week, right?
Woo!
May 1, woohoo! It means what you all get to next week, so.
Next week, so be thinking about it.
Yes. Yeah, go ahead, do your stuff.
I'll do it.
I don't know if you've seen the river forecast,
3
but
feet
the
more?
current projection is 22.5. I say that, I just received an email from Gina Harden while we were in the meeting, and they forecast from 20. It had the 21.8, which was the forecast earlier today, to 24 foot. So we could see kind of a range in between there. They're projected for rain over the next 3 days. Mostly tomorrow is the heavier rain, but we will be setting up HESCOs tomorrow around the hole, and we'll be going up some in certain locations. At 22.5, we are getting pretty close to the top of the wall. The top of the permanent concrete wall, so we'll have to go up with the temporary barriers, and then Market Street as well. So as this forecast changes, we'll have to probably update you on what we're doing, but you will see activity of our staff down there. Actually, some of them were down there this evening, putting clay back. The railroad tracks were raised by the Burlington Junction short line, so we had to refill in some rock area with clay to.
How high did they raise those?
It was about 4 inches. I don't know if some settlement occurred after they ran a couple cars across. I think they were hoping for about 6 inches, but the top of the rail's at like 20.04.
Okay.
So, I think that was about.
Agenda items.
Agenda, I have addition of 3 different agenda items. There'll be final pay, for the contract with Carl A. Nelson at the Valley Street, hole. Things didn't work out very well the way it was bid. More than anything, that project became much more than it was bid out to be. So we're gonna terminate contract with them and final pay them, and then rebid that out here, soon. And then the flood wall, the S&G Construction, performed quite a bit of the crack sealing, in that area. They still have no access to get the rest of it done. So it'll be a release of retention because they were in the retention funds. So they'll leave about $10,000 in retention funds. And then the Tiger grant, the contract that we approved 2 weeks ago needed to be altered to meet DOT's regulations. So we'll have an amendment resolution to amend that resolution, amend that contract to comply with that. So I'll have 3 additional items that were not on the work session, so.
Tiger grant has been an easy process to work through.
If that's what you wanna say.
That's something to say. All right, other items, we got the flood protection, TEMA property. GNB has not been down there doing demo for the last several weeks. We are sending a letter, didn't really pay a whole lot of attention to the format on what's included on that through our attorney, to the building owner as well as the insurance provider, letting them know that we're asking that the retainage be held on to. I think we have May 15-ish.
May 29, maybe.
May 29 is the timeframe where we have to have everything formalized and in place that we're wanting to use the 10% demo reserve on that structure to make sure that we have that held. I mean, they're still moving forward on it. I think they're gonna be back on site yet this week.
Yeah.
And, you know, GNB, they pulled off to do some other work, but they also they're not gonna do work where they're not getting paid. And that's really the essence of what this is about, is timely payment on stuff. And part of that is I just wanna let you know where things stand with the developer as things come forward in the future. We did get the streets open, and we're very thankful that happened before things got pulled off, but this isn't beneficial for us long-term to have a delay sit in the center of a project. And the only other thing I did want to get to, we've been working with Matt, trying to get a contract in place for the lease at Greer's, for lease at the depot for Greer's Restaurant. It doesn't look like we're coming to anything, at least right now. I don't see that we're coming to anything that's a formalized agreement to have happen. So we'll have to, at this point, if I hear something different, we'll continue to work with them, but we are also in a position where we're willing to look at other alternatives for the use of that space.
Anything else?
Yeah, it's a nice space, and Matt wanted me to compliment the city and Nick and Jim. Everyone's been just phenomenal to work with, so there was no problem there. He loves what he does as a teacher. He's very gifted, and he wants to continue doing that. So I do hope that somebody steps up and leases out that place, because it will make one hell of an ice cream shop, a little eatery, and the depot, and all the people working so hard to fix up the depot deserve that. And I think it will happen. So get the word out there that space is available.
All right. And I think that's probably enough for tonight, huh?
Yes.
Well, all right then. Thank you, everybody. Good night.
Thank you.